In this project, I'm investigating a cyber campaign linked to the Lazarus Group, a threat actor responsible for some of the most significant cyber attacks in recent history. First, I'll create a folder structure to organize the files and evidence collected during the investigation. As I mentioned earlier, I chose to investigate the Lazarus Group because they are one of the most well-known threat actors and have been linked to numerous high-profile cyber campaigns. Because the group has been studied so extensively, there is plenty of threat intelligence available to connect indicators to known campaigns and attacks. Next, I'm searching AlienVault for intelligence related to known Lazarus Group campaigns and activity. One post that stands out is Lazarus Group targets macOS users via quick-fix attack. This post contains indicators from a recent campaign and helps establish a connection between the observed activity and known Lazarus Group operations. The first IOC is a malicious file hash associated with the Lazarus campaign. The hash is associated with 9 related threat intelligence pulses and is classified as malicious with a file score of 10. One of the most relevant pulses is macOman malware. This pulse links the file to a Lazarus Group campaign targeting macOS users. The information suggests that the malware targets macOS users through quick-fix social engineering techniques and uses fake collaboration platforms such as Microsoft Teams to lure victims. The pulse also indicates that the malware is designed to steal credentials and other sensitive information. Next, I'm searching the domain. The domain also returns 9 related threat pulses, indicating that it has been observed in multiple investigations and campaigns. It also confirms that the file is a fake Microsoft Teams application used as part of the attack. OTX also identifies the domain as malicious and shows that it resolves to the IP address I'll be analyzing next. This helps establish a connection between the two indicators. As previously mentioned, the OTX results classify the domain as malicious, link it to a Lazarus Group activity, and show that it resolves to the same IP address identified during the investigation. Finally, I'm searching the IP address. The IP address appears in 13 threat pulses and is classified as suspicious. One pulse that stands out is Lazarus Group targets macOS users via quick-fix attack, which links the infrastructure to a recent Lazarus operation targeting macOS users. Finding the same pulse associated with the hash, domain, and IP address provides strong evidence that all 3 indicators are connected to the same campaign. Again, the OTX results link the IP address to multiple threat pulses, including one associated with Lazarus Group activity. The IP is also connected to the same infrastructure as the domain identified during the investigation, further strengthening the relationship between the indicators. Next, I'll run all 3 indicators through VirusTotal and review the findings for each one. I'll begin by examining the file hash. VirusTotal shows that 35 out of 64 security vendors flagged the file as malicious. Multiple security vendors identify the file as nukes-fed malware, further supporting its association with malicious activity. The sample is a zip archive named teamsapp.zip and is primarily classified as a Trojan downloader. The VirusTotal results identified the file as malicious and linked it to the nukes-fed malware family. Analysis also revealed encrypted communications and connections to external infrastructure, indicating command and control activity. Next, I'll examine the domain to determine whether it's been associated with malicious activity. VirusTotal shows that 19 out of 91 security vendors flagged the domain as malicious. The domain update-teams.live appears to imitate a Microsoft Teams update page and was registered in March 2026. The VirusTotal results classify the domain as malicious and show that it resolves to the same IP address identified during the investigation. Its recent registration date and Microsoft Teams theme name are also consistent with phishing activity. Finally, I'll examine the IP address. VirusTotal shows that 14 out of 91 security vendors flag this IP as malicious. The IP is hosted by Router Hosting LLC and is associated with several suspicious domains, including update-teams.live. This helps connect the domain to the infrastructure used in the campaign. The VirusTotal results classify the IP address as malicious and associate it with several suspicious domains. The presence of a related PowerShell file communicating with the IP further strengthens its connection to malicious activity. Now I'm using MITRE ATT&CK to build a profile of Lazarus Group. I'm looking for information about the group's aliases, targets, and attack methods to better understand the threat actor behind this campaign. The MITRE ATT&CK profile shows that the tactics observed during this investigation are consistent with known Lazarus Group activity. The investigated indicators are linked to a Mac OS-focused operation that uses fake Microsoft Teams invitations and social engineering to trick victims into executing malicious content. Next, I'll review several threat intelligence reports related to Lazarus Group. By comparing information from multiple sources, I can verify my findings and strengthen the connection between these indicators and the campaign. From the dark reading article, I learned more about the targets and objectives behind the campaign. The article describes a Lazarus Group operation that targets macOS users through quick-fix social engineering attacks. It explains how Lazarus uses fake meeting invitations and social engineering to trick macOS users into running malicious commands and stealing sensitive information. From the Any.Run article, I learned how the attack works from start to finish. The article links the investigated hash, domain, and IP address to Lazarus Group activity targeting macOS users. Attackers use fake Microsoft Teams and other collaboration platform lures to trick victims into running malicious commands, ultimately leading to credential theft and data exfiltration. The OTX Pulse links the investigated hash and domain to Lazarus Group activity and provides additional context about the malware and attack methods being used. It also shows how multiple indicators can be connected to the same operation, strengthening and validating the findings of this investigation. Next, I'm running a subnet pivot on Shodan to investigate related network infrastructure. No results were found. This means that the infrastructure is no longer active or isn't visible through Shodan. Next, I'm using Censys to investigate the infrastructure associated with the IP address. Censys identified several domains hosted on the same system, including update-teams.live, which was one of the indicators found earlier in the investigation. This helps confirm the relationship between the domain and the underlying infrastructure. Next, I'm searching the domain in URL scan. The scan was unable to retrieve any content from the website and returned an empty response error. This suggests that the domain is no longer active, which is common for phishing infrastructure after a campaign has ended. In this phase, I'm mapping the indicators identified during the investigation to MITRE ATT&CK techniques. The file hash maps to user execution because the victim must run a malicious file. The domain maps to phishing because it is used to lure victims. And the IP address maps to command and control because it is associated with attacker infrastructure and communications. Next, I'll build an attack heat map to visualize the techniques associated with the indicators identified during the investigation. I'm mapping each IOC to its corresponding MITRE ATT&CK technique. This allows me to visualize how each indicator relates to a specific stage of the attack. The highlighted areas show where the phishing domain, malicious file, and IP address fit into the attack. Again, the malicious file hash maps to user execution because the victim must download and run the fake Microsoft Teams application. The domain maps to phishing because it is used to lure victims to attacker-controlled content. And the IP address maps to command and control because it is associated with the infrastructure used for attacker communications. Next, I'm creating a Sigma detection rule based on the campaign infrastructure. The goal is to detect connections to the identified IP address and generate an alert if a system communicates with known malicious infrastructure. The Sigma rule was successfully converted into a Splunk query using Sigma Converter. This demonstrates how threat intelligence can be turned into an actionable detection. Next, I created a Yara rule for the malware sample. This helps us search for similar malware on other systems and helps identify additional infections. In a real environment, the Yara rule could be deployed to an endpoint security platform or used during threat hunting. After identifying the phishing domain, I created a 3-layer blocking strategy. By blocking the domain at multiple layers, organizations can make it much harder for users to reach malicious websites or fall victim to phishing attacks. This approach is known as defense in depth, where multiple security controls work together in case one layer fails. Finally, I created a report for this investigation. In this project, I investigated a Lazarus Group campaign targeting macOS users through phishing and social engineering techniques. Using VirusTotal, AlienVault OTX, MITRE ATT&CK, Censys, and other threat intelligence sources, I analyzed a phishing domain, a malicious file hash, and an associated IP address. The investigation linked all 3 indicators to the Lazarus Group's ClickFix campaign, which used fake Microsoft Teams infrastructure to deliver malware and steal sensitive information. The findings were mapped to MITRE ATT&CK techniques and used to develop detection and prevention recommendations. These include blocking the identified IP address and phishing domain, adding the malware hash to security tools, and monitoring for similar Microsoft Teams-themed phishing attempts. Organizations should also watch for suspicious downloads and outbound network connections that may indicate Lazarus-related activity.